Before my demonstration of how to draw drapery using charcoal, I want to tell you a little bit about the materials you're going to need. Charcoal comes in a variety of different forms, including vine, compressed, and pencils. And then you're going to need several different types of erasers and different tools to smudge the charcoal as well. First off, there's three basic types of drawing materials in charcoal. The first type are vine or willow, the second compressed charcoal, and then the third are charcoal pencils, which is really compressed charcoal wrapped in wood. So why the different varieties? The first one that you're going to need is called vine. It's also sometimes known as willow. And it can be very, very thin. This is sort of a medium thickness, or it could be even thicker. And it is actually made from vines or willows that have been burnt or charred. So that's what you're drawing with. Now, the second type is called compressed charcoal. I actually don't use any compressed charcoal in this drawing at all in this form. I prefer the pencils. Unless I'm making a really super big drawing, and then I would absolutely use this compressed charcoal. Now, the compressed charcoal is really dense. It's nice to kind of break it in small pieces and then use the side of it to block in areas. But you can see how dark it is compared to the vine or the willow, which is much lighter. Okay, so you can see the different looks. So in this area here, that's where I use the vine charcoal. See sort of a lighter gray. And then in this area here, I use charcoal pencils, and that's really compressed charcoal. And you can see the richer, darker, kind of a velvety black drawing material. Charcoal pencils come in different hardnesses. I've got a 2B, a 6B, as well as a 4B. I use the 4B mostly on this drawing because I just like something that has like a middle value, and I didn't need anything that was like 6B, like that dark, that dense. As far as erasers go, you definitely want to have a kneaded eraser on hand, and once you open them, this is how you clean a kneaded eraser. You pull it apart, you push it back together. You are literally kneading it, as in K-N-E-A-D-E-D, okay, as opposed to N-E-E-D. But I like to say you need a kneaded eraser. The other eraser you're definitely going to need is some kind of white vinyl eraser. And the white vinyl eraser is great if you need to get your paper back to like a pure white, or as close to pure white as you can. Now, I use a paper towel quite a bit when I'm working on my charcoal drawings, because I kind of deal with them like I was starting a painting, and I push the vine charcoal around quite a bit. So a good paper towel will work fine, or a tissue with no lotion in it. The other tool you may want to have is something called a paper stump or a tortillon. They come in different widths. This one is a 1/4 inch. They come thicker, and they also come thinner. And what artists do is they use these to blend in small areas, but you can also see that it kind of lifts up the charcoal. And some people like that kind of smoothed out appearance. I prefer, as you probably know, if you're my student, but I prefer there to be a mix of techniques in the drawing, including smudging, but also some hatching, cross-hatching as well. It just gives the drawing more movement and more life. Another tool you may want to have is some sandpaper. Now, you can buy these handy-dandy sandpaper boards. It's just a bunch of small pieces of sandpaper stapled on this little board. And then you sharpen your charcoal pencils by rotating them and sanding them. As you can see, I'm doing that, making quite a mess. All right, but then you get a nice, really fine point. Speaking of messes, charcoal is dusty. So when you're finished with your charcoal drawing, you're going to want to get some kind of fixative for it. A crystal clear varnish works well. And you spray it on your drawing. It's kind of like hairspray. It will set the charcoal so that it will smudge less, but it's never smudge proof. And I hope this helped clarify some of the materials that you would use for charcoal drawing.
In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to lay out a drawing using charcoal. First, I do what I always do. I look through my viewfinder and try to imagine my drawing. By doing that, it really helps me think about scale. Now, I'm going to start off by using vine charcoal to lay out the drawing and also to block it in. Please be aware that this drawing is sped up to twice the time that I would normally complete this drawing, so it's going to be a little fast. The complete directions for laying out a drawing of drapery, including sighting, you would want to refer to my video on drawing a drapery with graphite. So in this drawing, I was more concerned with just showing you how to draw the drapery using charcoal. All right, now this is vine charcoal, and what I did was I kind of initially drew the left, top, and right side, so I knew how large the drapery would be on the page. And now with the vine charcoal, as I'm drawing, I'm not just drawing using line, but I'm also just going ahead and blocking in some of the shapes of the shadows. And that really helps me define where I'm at. And so I'm really seeing the drawing right now, blocking it out in terms of shapes and not just lines. So this is a real different way to start a drawing. Now I use charcoal in a way that's a lot more similar to how I would lay out a painting. So I would lay out a painting this way. This is how I would lay out an underpainting. If I was working from observation. So again, the whole thing, I'm using the vine charcoal. Sometimes I'm using a little bit on the side, as you can see, making that larger, thicker, shadowy shape that I just made. And then, you know, I actually don't ever use the point. And I don't hold it like a pencil at all. So you'll see that I'm holding the vine charcoal, using that overhand grip, and the whole thing is, you know, working with a gestural drawing. And here I am with an eraser. So, you know, with charcoal, I go back and forth between blocking in the shadows, and then there's eraser again, and then using an eraser to erase the lights back in. So this process for me of drawing with charcoal is quite a bit different than how I would lay out a drawing using pencil. And for me, it goes faster too. So again, I'm just, you know, blocking out where all the shadows are that I see. And as you can see, I'm not too neat about it, but I'm trying to get the basic shapes as accurate as possible. Here I am working on the cast shadow at the top, you know, that really kind of skinny triangular shape up there, just blocking that in. Also, you want to keep in mind that I had just, the day before, I had just completed a drawing of this drapery, so I was really familiar with the forms of it, and so it for me, it just didn't require as much sighting or measuring. I just kind of went for it. I do think that I made my drawing a little bit short, could have been a little bit longer. One of the things that I'm very aware of when I'm making my videos is trying to make my drawings fit in the actual video format. So yeah, it should be a little bit more stretched out. It's a little bit short. Pretty soon I'm going to take that left side and pull it up a little bit more. I catch that. So again, still working with the vine charcoal. See how I'm just blasting in that shadowy area there. And you also see now that I am using a paper towel. And I like Visa paper towels. They're really, really sturdy and they don't have much of a texture. They're a little more expensive, but they're really good for art. And so I'm using that paper towel to smudge everything basically that I just did. So I have these tones on my drawing, and this stage is very, very much like if I were doing an underpainting, working in oils, building up the pattern of light and shadow. And again, I'm using that term that I used in my the graphite tonal drawing tutorial for the drapery. That's what you're after. That's what you're after in these tonal drawings, especially in the beginning. You're looking for the big shapes of light and shadow because you want to get that pattern of light and shadows down. All right, there I was using an eraser. Here I'm using a kneaded eraser, putting in that light a little bit more in there, erasing that light, and still working with the kneaded eraser. You can see me playing around with it a little bit, softening the edge of that shadow with the kneaded eraser, blocking in that light down there, just cleaning it up, putting the lights back on, if I had smudged on top of it. So that's what I was doing with a kneaded eraser. And now if I need need, N-E-E-D, yeah, if I need to get the drawing back to a bright white, I'll use a vinyl eraser. Here I'm using the vine charcoal again because I wanted to darken up that edge, and then I kind of switched back to a kneaded eraser. So I'm darkening up that edge of the cast shadow, and I'm aware that the cast shadow has two values. Now here I am deciding to raise that left corner up a little bit. So I had stepped back, and you might have seen the little transition in the video, but when I stepped back I discovered that the proportion was a little off, and it was annoying me. So I thought, yeah, I'm just going to extend that top left corner up a little bit higher and get the proportion a little closer. Now when you're working with drapery, of course, whatever you're drawing, you want to try to get it as accurate as possible, but when you're drawing drapery, it's not as critical to get your proportion, your accuracy like 100% as it would be if you were drawing, like, say, a portrait, or if you were drawing something in perspective, or drawing ellipses. So there are some, there's some subject matter in some things in drawing, the different subjects that you really got to nail. You've got to get it like 100% accurate. Here I'm working on that little corner that has the stitches that are kind of bunched together and making the fabric do this sort of wrinkled thing that I find interesting. I worked on that on my last drawing too. So I like that variation because I didn't want the drapery drawing to look like totally smooth and flat. I wanted to have a little bit of variety. So that's why I get into working that edge a little bit. So working back now, I've got the kneaded eraser, so I'm switching back and forth between like a kneaded eraser, and now I'm using a charcoal pencil. And what you can't see me doing up there is I, of course, drew the push pin, because that's another one of my favorite parts, was the little push pin. Okay, so here I'm doing some hatching with my charcoal pencil. Now, for charcoal drawings as well as for graphite drawings, I think what makes a more technically advanced drawing is when you can combine different types of techniques in the same drawing, right? So I started by laying out all the shadows with the vine charcoal. I smudged them all together with the paper towel, and now what I'm doing is I'm using a charcoal pencil and I'm putting in some hatch marks, and sometimes they're real subtle and you just see like kind of a dark value, and other times you're actually going to see some of my hatch marks and some of my detail work with the charcoal pencil. And for most of this drawing I just sort of stuck to the 4B charcoal pencil because I found that was a good kind of medium value. So I have a 2B, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I also have a 6B pencil, and so for some super light shading I decided I was going to use the 2B, but for most of it I use a 4B. So here I'm playing around with that quarter. You can see I'm working with that push pin shape, which is just 2 circles, so more little ellipses. There is the little shadow of that push pin that I thought was kind of interesting. Here I'm cleaning up that top corner with the kneaded eraser. Now I am gripping the pencil. You see how my grip of my pencil changes sometimes. If I want to get tight and clear, I'll hold it like I'm writing. But for most of my drawing, I use that overhand grip and I hold my pencil pretty far back so I can get a really, really nice sense of movement. Well, that also comes from the fact that I'm a painter. There I'm using a tortillon, which is also known as a paper stub, to do a little bit of blending. And I did that just to show you a little bit about how I would use it to blend. I don't find those essential for my drawings. I could do a whole charcoal drawing as I'm doing here pretty much with a piece of vine charcoal, 4B charcoal pencil, and a paper towel. I'm sometimes into kind of a minimalist materials. I don't get real complex with that kind of stuff. But a lot of people like that. A lot of people like to have more variety of the materials that they have. Here I'm working with that sort of irregularity with the material where that stitching is at the edge of the pillowcase, and then I've got a little bit on the bottom right of the pillowcase that's in shadow, and you saw that that actually was included in the shadow, and I just defined the edge a little bit. And of course, this is a tonal drawing, so you don't want to leave any outlines in your finished drawing. Here I'm using some hatching. Okay, so you see me hatching with my charcoal pencil, again building up some value, and you can compare it with the photo on the left. There I'm deciding to change up that shadow, and I'm changing the proportion a little bit. In retrospect, I think I shifted it a little too much. Sometimes people have a tendency to do that, to overcorrect a little bit. Okay, so working with kneaded eraser there, erasing the lights. Here back to some hatching with the charcoal pencil. So in my hand I've got, you can see I'm back to the kneaded eraser. So I switch back and forth between the kneaded eraser, and now I thought, yeah, I need to soften up a little bit of that shading, so I'm back to the vine charcoal a little bit. So, you know, if you want to bring back some of that soft shading, and here I am with my paper towel again. Okay, so even though that was my first step, you can always go back to that. Here I am again, vine charcoal. I wanted to kind of soften up that shadow in there. I wanted to make it larger. I wanted to bring it around. So I'm shifting the proportions a little bit as I draw. You know, that's because every once in a while I step back or lean back and assess the drawing, and then here I am again, putting in some more folds and using my paper towel to do a little smudging, but sometimes I don't smudge things completely. I might leave some of the marks or the hatching showing a little bit, and then just smudge some other areas. All right, so vine charcoal, right? I needed to build up some of the darker values on the cast shadow there on the right side, and I'm really aware of the variations of the edge of that shadow too. There's like that one beautiful area at the top that gets really, really kind of soft and fuzzy. So here I'm playing around with the edges of my shadow, and I'm pretty close to being done, just having kind of a good final look and a few finishing touches. I'm lifting up with my kneaded eraser a little bit of value on that corner of the pillowcase down there, doing a little more erasing of that light. Thought that needed, I was just trying to make my brightest lights a little bit brighter, and then just using a brush there to get rid of some of those little erasure crumbs that the white vinyl eraser always leaves those. Here is just a little bit more of the vine charcoal with that subtle, additional fold that you see right there on the left side, and there I'm smudging it in just a bit using the paper towel. Here I'm cleaning up the edge of that shadow on the top and softening up a little bit with the paper towel, and just finishing up the drawing, checking out the edges of my shadows, cleaning them up or softening them as needed. So that pretty much wraps up that drawing. And I think charcoal's so much fun. I hope you enjoy it.